Melissa Miles, tell me about yourself. Introduce yourself to to the web, and tell me a little bit about soulkitchen.org, if you would, as an intro.
Okay. Well, my name is Melissa Miles, and I am an environmental biologist and conservation planner, and a permaculture designer and teacher, and social agitator. Um,
Good, good.
I started my career in the environmental world and was disillusioned early on, and there seemed to be something missing with environmentalism. And that was the human being. There were no humans considered in any of the restoration projects that we would work on. I mean, if I was working on a municipal park plan, yeah, we considered walking trails and that sort of thing, but we didn't really consider um, the buy-in, getting the buy-in of the people. Um,
Uh,
and I think that is something that's been missing for a long time with environmental movement. And through a series of fortunate events, I came to permaculture, actually through traveling to other places in the world.
uh,
And when I returned back to the area where I was raised, I recognized that there really were very few people who even knew what permaculture was. So for the last few years, I've been the organizer of the Eastern Pennsylvania Permaculture Guild, and we now have almost 500 members, which is amazing to me. So people are starting to get to know what the word means and understand a little bit about regenerative design. And the movement just keeps growing here in the area. It's fantastic to see this area of the country, the Rust Belt, starting to, drive down the street and see, instead of blighted neighborhoods, you see a lot of new urban farms springing up, people thinking about growing some of their own food, and it's a really good time to be in this area. Just this past week, I was involved with, I was really fortunate to be involved with this, but there was a project called the Soil Kitchen. And the Soil Kitchen, soilkitchen.org is their website, and it's still up. But it was a temporary project. It was planned to coincide with the EPA Brownfields Conference this past week. And it brought together people from the EPA, people involved with the arts in Philadelphia, and the Future Farmers organization from actually out in California came out here and put up a temporary site with a windmill on the roof, and people came and learned how to build their own windmills. Um, they served soup to people free, and in exchange the people would bring their soil samples from all over the city to have them tested. The EPA was there with a mobile testing lab, and I did a presentation. There were a couple other workshops going on so people could learn more about soils. And the interesting thing was the theme was the windmill and the fact that it was across from the Don Quixote monument in the city of Philadelphia, which was, it was planned that way for reasons. So they actually did some readings of Don Quixote at the Soul Kitchen. So it was a really, really fun thing to be involved with, and I hope they do it again.
it sounds good. I was hoping you'd tell me how one goes from conservation to permaculture in a couple of sentences, if you could.
Okay.
That sounds like a leap to me.
Well, I've always been interested in natural systems
Mhm.
and the fact that permaculture so conveniently puts designing human systems with a template of ecosystems behind them, informed by these great three ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. It just seemed like that missing piece to the work that I was doing, to be able to not only regenerate the earth, but to help people regenerate themselves, to empower people, to teach people skills which make them feel like they're co-creators rather than just passengers going through life, always sort of just as cogs in the wheel. So
Okay.
I think that's what I still get so passionate about permaculture. It's like the coolest thing in the world.
Well, yeah, as you know, I'm equally as passionate, perhaps more. Um, I'm coming from a kind of permaculture arts orientation, if you would. I've just sought today partners for a virtual permaculture arts school
Fantastic.
project,
Wow.
and I'm hoping to teach people through the internet about not the nuts and bolts or the soil blending aspects, but the spiritual or sacred aspects. Why don't you tell me about how permaculture has influenced your spiritual development?
Well, as I had mentioned to you, I found it so interesting that you put permaculture and alchemy together in your work. And alchemy has been something that I have been aspiring to do. And I think...
Oh, don't bother me. I'm just looking at my girlfriend.
Sorry.
It's a small world here, Melissa.
Hi.
Hi, yeah, Malou.
That's all right. My kids are all downstairs. I've locked them out. So. Well, I think both, what you just mentioned about the arts and permaculture, that's part of the permaculture conversation that we haven't really done enough with. And that's why I like the integral permaculture stuff that's going on now, trying to get that part of people. Our society is so left-brained and logical, but we're really not logical, but we like to think we are. But the fact that music and art are so important in bringing a whole other group to permaculture and helping to inform the work that we do with permaculture and helping the transformative change that permaculture can be, which is why I think alchemy and permaculture are so compatible. They're both, about regenerating things. And permaculture is about regenerating the earth and communities and our culture. And alchemy is about regenerating and transforming ourselves. So it's interesting to see that in the past few years, these two separate sort of disciplines that I've studied have merged and become the same. And they were never different. It's just my perspective. And everybody is starting to recognize, we're all these things are connected.
Interesting. So is permaculture now in a revolutionary state, do you think? Is it a global revolution yet?
I think it is well on its way. And it doesn't matter what people call it, but people are starting to wake up to the fact that something is not right. Something's been not right for quite some time with our culture and the way we live and the disconnectedness. All these, the recent books that are coming out about The Last Child in the Woods, about nature deficit disorder, disconnecting children from the natural world. People always talk about, going back to the land, but going back to the land movement. We never left the land. We just sort of turned our heads a little bit and thought we were above or beyond it. But really, when you look at what's happening in Japan, it's so obvious that we are still so deeply connected to the earth. And we need to have the respect for the earth, which actually will help our culture to grow and thrive and people to be happier.
I hope so, yes. Good point. Is the Guild actually producing permaculture-based songs or poems or art or stories now?
And I would like for them to. We do sing the compost song.
What is that?
Oh, it's sung to the tune of London Bridge.
Let's hear it.
Please don't make me sing. No, that wouldn't be good. You lose everybody.
Well, give me some lyrics then. Give me the words.
Compost made in 18 days. It's sung to the tune of London Bridges.
Right.
But there are actually some fantastic permaculture videos on YouTube with people who just start singing about permaculture, and it's really fascinating to show these things when we have our meetings, and it gets people to loosen up a little bit and see that there's some really big issues in the world that we have to deal with, but boy, if we're not having fun, what's the point? Art is from the hand of man, and we need to put the hand of man back into the earth.
Gotcha. Okay, Miss Miles, you can go ahead and ask me some questions. I'll try to answer them as best I can.
Okay, well, the first question I had for you was regarding your inner and outer system of the sacred, the graphic that you had.
Yes, right.
And I love the work that you're doing because I love how you're integrating all these things. You know, we tend to compartmentalize things in our world, but really they really are connected. They're all connected, and it's archetypal things that we're dealing with here. So you're actually bringing that back into the conversation, and I love it. So, you know, the triune symbol is an archetype. They're, you know, in certain religions, the Christianity, for instance, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. In many religions, there are there's this triune archetype. And the 3-4-5 triangle is representative of the classic Trivium. And I'm curious as to how you think, or if you think at all, the Trivium method of education, the classic way of learning, how it relates to permaculture and personal empowerment.
Well, I'm a paper away from a PhD in environmental design, and I have no idea what you're talking about relative to education and process therein. The model came to me basically in one fell swoop. I didn't spend hours trying to figure out the model. It just happened to show up. It was a very alchemic moment, I suppose. But I think I could say that I would be promoting children being outside and teaching each other rather than stuck in a classroom per se. And I have a lot of problem with technology and games now. I think that they're largely a waste of time, making kids consumers, making them aggressive, making them brain dead. So I think that's sort of the way I would answer your question on that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. You know, when we look at children today, when my generation, and it wasn't all that long ago, we were outside all the time. And I was always in the creek, whether there was snow on the ground or not. I would fall. I mean, every time I'd fall in the creek. It was the fun of it. But we'd always be playing out there, and now it's like this passenger mentality, you know. And I think a lot of it comes from the school system, sort of compartmentalizing everything and making these passive consumers of even knowledge at this point. So it's, you know, sort of learn this stuff, spit it back for the test, and that's the end of that. Instead of teaching children to be co-creating the world that they want to live in. And I think that's very disempowering. So, yeah, that's a whole interesting conversation we could have. But I wanted to ask you a few other things.
Good, go ahead.
How do you define sacred?
Well, that is the highest path and the greatest unknown that I have going. And I would say that I'm hoping to help people to define sacred for themselves, find a model or a process that helps them get there, rather than telling them what is sacred. So there's a perspective for you.
I like that. It's not, yeah. There's no off-the-shelf sacred.
No, I would say if there was some things that were sort of sacred, I would say family and the planet. I think is probably the biggest, single most sacred thing I can allude to. But the problem is I don't have a lot of notions about it, and when I ask people, they don't know what it is, and so there's a big void here. And so this model that I'm working on helps people to look at components and process, and hopefully they'll come up with something that's sacred to them. That's the hope here.
Absolutely, yeah. Find your passion. Find what is sacred to you.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm sure that's going to be healthy and happy and peaceful. So I'm really happy to be on that path.
Okay, I had a couple more things for you. The new alchemy that you've brought forth,
Yeah.
you've put together the imaginative, the the shamanic, community, earth, and digital. And you define the digital aspect as electronic learning and feeling, working with computers, including chat, text, email, and documents. Can you talk about how this digital aspect is distinct from the community aspect of New Alchemy?
Yeah, often I think that the digital is kind of a solo practice for people, and in the community is obviously a broader group process. That would be the sort of quick, down and dirty comparison
Okay.
of both of those, right? Yeah, and digital could also be a part of creating imagery and music with computers. That would be kind of into the sonic alchemy, which isn't in your list, but sonic alchemy is a part of the thing.
Yeah, and I did look into that a bit more because the patterns, music is really just sacred geometry, and it's also connected. I have to keep saying it, but it's true. The bumper sticker is true.
Yep, there's a new paradigm coming. I can see it.
Absolutely, yeah. I have another one for you.
All righty, I'm ready.
Okay. So now that we've reached the point where most people are recognizing that we, those of us primarily in the Western culture, have been on the wrong path for some time now, and that some sort of change is needed. They're recognizing that something's up, and a lot of people can't quite define it, but they're starting to wake up to it.
Right.
How can we do something, or can we do anything, to prevent greenwashing or co-opting the regenerative or sustainable alternatives? Because I don't know if you're familiar with, there's a movement, the Venus Project, for instance. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, in my opinion, at any rate, is getting people who are just starting to wake up to the fact that we've been living a way that is not sustainable. We can't go on this way, and nobody's really happy the way we're living, which is why we have so many prescription antidepressants out there. But the Venus Project sort of offers this false hope to people that yet another top-down leadership model is going to save them. But really, in my opinion, what somebody who is fully conscious and fully aware recognizes that what is really needed is for each of us to make a change in ourselves rather than someone else do it for us again. So how do we prevent that from happening, or can we do that? What can we change that?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. One is that we need to make things like recycling sacred. We need to reprioritize. I can get that. We need to reassess basic everyday processes and acts like recycling and make it more than just a chore. If we can make it more of a sacred process, then I think there's a hope for us. It's also that I think we should be creating our own gardens. We should ripping up our lawns and getting into the earth, because that will get us in touch with what's real. And if it's a chance to get out of the TV and to stop buying stuff and to start gardening, that will start changing our perspective as well. And that gardening or permaculture, to me, it needs to be more of a sacred process, of course.
Yeah, I agree. And the especially your point about the lawn, I have like a particular, I'm going after lawns with a vengeance now.
Good.
Because it is such a waste to keep that system, that immature state. It takes so much energy and input. I did a talk on it recently, and I had to do some research, and I was astounded at how much energy and money and water is wasted on just maintaining this immature monoculture, the lawn. But it's big. It's a big industry, so there's somebody with an agenda to keep lawns out there. So, but yeah, growing your own food is hugely empowering. I mean, anywhere you travel in the world, the one commonality, even if you don't speak the language, the one thing that everybody has in common, as far as I can tell, is that everybody loves to eat good food, and that is like a language that has no barriers or boundaries, and the feeling of particularly starting kids at growing food. I mean, they'll eat their peas, even if they won't eat peas from somewhere else. Their peas are special because they grew them. And I think there's something magical about that. There's something very alchemical about that.
Right.
Very transformative. So I agree.
Very cool. I wanted to conclude our conversation today and talk a little bit about your perspective on the crash and the post-crash society that many are seeing coming, but many aren't really planning for. So tell me what you think is the crash part, and then how you are dealing with that.
Well, I think part of it is a lot. Paradigms are difficult to change, and people don't want to look at uncomfortable things. And reassessing the way we live and recognizing that the change has to come within us in order to avoid things like a crash. But I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to be all at once sort of crash. It might be in fits and starts. Certain systems will fail, and look what's happening in Japan right now. Very timely. We're starting to have these conversations about building more nuclear plants, and that's the way to go, and that's sustainable energy technology and safe. And well, look what just happened. That is sort of, now that's the end of that industry, let's hope. But people are reassessing now. Maybe that wasn't quite where we should have put our money on that system to save us. So I think we'll see as things start to fall apart a little more. I don't think it'll happen all at once. I think it'll be different sectors, and there'll be, stopgap measures. But ultimately, it's like rolling a boulder up a hill. You'll go up a few feet, and it may roll back a foot or two, but you'll keep pushing. And I think ultimately we'll get to that summit, but it's going to take people reskilling, I think is the big thing. Reskilling to learn how to do things for themselves in order to save themselves. There's no top-down saving you from, the way our economy is going to be, for instance, after we have reached peak oil and it's really affected all the sectors of our economy. It's an unsustainable system, and it's going to sputter out. And eventually, I think that if enough people recognize what's happening quickly enough, they'll be able to make the changes in themselves to be able to adapt. And I like to think that will happen. So I remain optimistic, but I'm going to go down fighting. So whatever happens, at least I'll know I tried.
Okay. I'm writing a new myth number 7 for me. I'm talking about a post-crash neighborhood, a rich neighborhood in San Francisco that is transforming itself into a permaculture sort of tribe. And I will put a bunch of alternative technologies in there, dig up the roads, make aqua ponds out of the swimming pools. I'm going to make this post-crash tribe sort of idyllic, and then I'll sort of test it. That's the sort of post-crash environment that I envision. I envision some people won't make it, some people will migrate, there'll be wars, there'll be struggles for resources, and some people will create pockets of sustainability down the road. So that's my kind of vision.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I think we're starting to see more of that realistic picture of a future in scientific novel, it's, science fiction novels and that sort of thing, where before it was we'll be out in space and we'll have all these fast rocket ships and we'll all be flying around. Now you're starting to see more realistic visions of what the future might hold. This brief snapshot in time is such a brief snapshot of the oil, the time we had this almost free energy, the oil period in our history. People will look back and just kind of shake their heads like, what were they thinking? But yeah, I think you're right. It'll be more localized. And I think the transition towns movement is a good start because people are starting to think about, okay, what essential services do we need as a community to come together? But I'm not sure that it will break down in terms of community lines. I know some people who are starting to buy large properties, pooling money within families and multi-generational groups buying land together, and each of them trying to learn different skills too. So that is happening. The smarter people perhaps, but I think some of us will still stay in the trenches and try to keep teaching people to to do some things for themselves to be able to make it through. And I like I said, I'm trying to remain optimistic because there's no alternative. I don't want to think about another way.
Well, we both agree that permaculture and the quest for the sacred could be a high path into this new era. So that's hopeful. We have some sort of agreement on what's happening here. That's positive.
Absolutely.
All right, Melissa Miles, I thank you for coming on here, and I will look forward to being part of the guild, of course, and seeing what's going on there, too. I wish you well.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, and I enjoy your work immensely, and I appreciate what you're doing, so thank you.
Thanks. I'll let you know when it's up.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Take
Ciao.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.